I was halfway up the ladder, paint can in hand, when I heard her voice drift through the open window. "Daniel," she whispered, soft and yearning, like a prayer she didn't mean for anyone to hear. "My name is Noah. I've been married to Emma for 6 years." The paint can slipped from my fingers first. Then my grip on the ladder loosened. I remember the sensation of falling, the world tilting sideways, the dull crack of my shoulder hitting the driveway. But louder than the pain, louder than everything, was that name echoing in my skull. Daniel. Not Noah. Daniel. I lay there on the concrete, staring up at the October sky, and felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with bones. Emma came running out, her face pale with shock. "Oh my God, Noah! Don't move, I'm calling an ambulance." Her hands were shaking as she dialed, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine fear. I watched her like she was a stranger, this woman I'd shared a bed with for over 2,000 nights. Who was Daniel? And why did she whisper his name like that in our home, on a Saturday afternoon while I painted the trim she'd been asking me to fix for months? The paramedics arrived. Emma rode with me to the hospital, gripping my hand, asking if I was okay, telling me everything would be fine. I said nothing. The morphine made everything soft around the edges, but that name stayed sharp. Daniel. Separated shoulder, they told me. Mild concussion. Lucky it wasn't worse. Emma signed the discharge papers while I sat in the wheelchair, watching her interact with the nurse, wondering how long I'd been living with someone I didn't actually know. We drove home in silence. She kept glancing at me, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of our neighborhood, the coffee shop where we had our first date, the park where I'd proposed. Everything looked the same. Everything felt different. That night I pretended to sleep, Emma curled up beside me, careful not to jostle my injured shoulder. Around 2 a.m, I heard her crying softly into her pillow. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing steady, playing the role of the oblivious husband. Because that's what I was, wasn't I? Oblivious. The next morning, I broke the silence over breakfast. "Who's Daniel?" Emma's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Her eyes went wide, then quickly shuttered. "What?" "When I fell yesterday, before I fell, you were inside and you said his name, Daniel. Who is he?" She set the cup down carefully, both hands gripping the edge of the table. "Noah, just tell me the truth. Please. After 6 years, you owe me that much." The story came out in pieces, fractured and halting. Daniel had been her college boyfriend. They'd dated for 3 years, been engaged for 6 months. She'd thought he was her forever. Then he'd left her for someone else, just 3 weeks before their wedding. It had destroyed her, she said. She'd spent 2 years putting herself back together. And then she'd met me. "I love you, Noah," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "I married you. I chose you. But you still think about him." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. "Do you still love him?" I asked. "No," she said quickly, then quieter. "I don't know. I haven't seen him in 8 years. I don't even know where he is. But you whisper his name when you think no one's listening." She buried her face in her hands. It was just a moment of weakness. I'd been looking through old photos on my laptop, stuff I'd forgotten I still had. It brought back memories. That's all it was. A stupid, meaningless moment. "It's not meaningless to me," I said. "I fell off a ladder and broke my shoulder, and all I could think about while lying on that driveway was that my wife was in love with someone else. I'm not in love with him! Then why were you looking at old photos? Why do you still have them? She had no answer for that either. I moved into the guest room that night. Emma begged me not to, promised we could work through this, suggested couples therapy. I agreed to the therapy part, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. We'd built a life together. We had a house, shared finances, mutual friends, her parents who treated me like their own son. You don't just walk away from all that because of one whispered name, do you? But trust, I learned, is like a bone. Once broken, it never quite heals the same way. The therapy sessions were brutal. Dr. Patterson, our counselor, was kind but unflinching. She made us talk about things we'd been avoiding for years. Emma admitted she'd kept not just photos, but letters, gifts, even the engagement ring Daniel had given her. She'd stored them in a box in the back of her closet, behind her winter clothes. I'd never known. Why keep them? Dr. Patterson asked gently. I don't know, Emma whispered. Maybe I was afraid of forgetting. Maybe I needed proof that someone had loved me that much once, even if it ended. But Noah loves you, Dr. Patterson pointed out. I know, but it's different. With Daniel, it was intense, consuming. With Noah, it's comfortable, safe. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Safe, I repeated. Is that really how you see me? As the safe choice? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Dr. Patterson intervened before things could escalate, but the damage was done. I was the consolation prize, the reliable backup plan, the man she'd settled for because the one she really wanted had gotten away. That night, lying alone in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and replayed our entire relationship in my mind. Our first date, where she'd been charming but slightly distant, like she was testing the waters. The way she'd said yes to my proposal after a long pause that I'd convinced myself was just surprise. How she'd cried on our wedding day, and I'd assumed they were happy tears. Maybe they had been. Or maybe she'd been mourning what could have been with someone else. I started spending more time at work. I was a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm, and there was always another project, another deadline, another reason to stay late at the office. My colleagues noticed the change. My friend Tyler asked if everything was okay at home. I told him it was fine, just busy season. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. It was Tyler who invited me to the charity fundraiser that November. His wife was on the organizing committee, something about raising money for children's literacy programs. I almost said no, but the thought of another evening in that guest room, listening to Emma move around the house we'd bought together, was unbearable. The fundraiser was at a downtown hotel, fancy enough to require a suit, but casual enough to feel approachable. I nursed a glass of whiskey at the bar and made small talk with Tyler about a bridge project we were consulting on. I was planning my exit strategy when she walked in. Her name was Olivia, I'd learn later. That night, she was just a woman in a deep blue dress who laughed at something her companion said, and the sound cut through the ambient noise like a bell. She had dark hair pulled back in a simple twist, and when she turned, I saw her face fully for the first time. There was something both gentle and fierce in her expression, like she'd known sorrow, but refused to let it define her. She caught me staring. Instead of looking away, she smiled, not flirtatiously, just openly, like she was pleased to find a friendly face in a crowded room. I smiled back, then forced myself to turn away, back to Tyler's monologue about load-bearing calculations. But I kept noticing her throughout the evening. She worked the room with easy grace, talking to donors, laughing with volunteers, kneeling down to speak with a little girl who'd wandered away from her parents. She wore no wedding ring. That's Olivia Grant, Tyler's wife, Melissa, said, appearing at my elbow. She's wonderful. Started the literacy program 3 years ago, after her mother passed away from dementia. Said reading was the last thing her mom recognized, even when she couldn't remember her own daughter's name. That's heartbreaking, I said. She turned her grief into something beautiful. That's rare. Melissa gave me a knowing look. She's single, by the way. Divorced about 2 years ago. I'm married, I reminded her. Are you? Melissa asked softly. Tyler said you've been sleeping in your guest room for a month. I didn't confirm or deny it. I just finished my drink and tried not to look at Olivia Grant for the rest of the evening. But fate, or coincidence, or whatever you want to call it, had other plans. I was leaving early, grabbing my coat from the check room, when I heard that laugh again. Olivia was there, also collecting her things, also apparently, calling it a night. Successful evening? I asked before I could stop myself. She turned, and up close I could see faint laugh lines around her eyes, a small scar on her chin. Real. Human. Beautiful. Very, she said. We exceeded our fundraising goal by 30%. You? I successfully avoided most of the small talk and only had to explain what a structural engineer does twice. So, a win. She laughed again, and something in my chest loosened. Noah, right? Tyler pointed you out earlier. Said you're the genius who's going to make sure the new community center doesn't collapse on anyone's head. That's the plan. And you're Olivia, the woman who's teaching kids to love reading. Trying to, anyway. She pulled on her coat, and I noticed her hands were ink-stained. Some days are better than others. We walked out together, into the cold November night. The valet was bringing cars around, and we had a few minutes to wait. We talked about nothing important, surface-level pleasantries, but there was an ease to it I hadn't felt in months. She didn't ask about my marriage. I didn't mention her divorce. We were just two people having a conversation. When her car arrived, she paused before getting in. It was nice meeting you, Noah. You too, I said, and meant it. I watched her drive away, then got in my own car and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. When I got home, the house was dark, except for a light in the bedroom. Emma was probably reading, waiting for me to come home so she could ask how my evening was, pretend we were still a normal couple doing normal couple things. I went to the guest room instead. The next therapy session, Dr. Patterson asked what we each wanted from the marriage. Emma said she wanted to rebuild trust, to prove that I was her choice, her priority. She said she'd thrown away the box of Daniel's things, every last item. She said she was all in. When Dr. Patterson turned to me, I found myself saying, I don't know anymore. Emma's face crumpled. What does that mean? It means I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can spend the rest of my life wondering if I'm enough, or if I'm just the safe choice because your first choice didn't work out. You are enough, Emma insisted. You're more than enough. I was stupid and nostalgic and I hurt you, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. What kind of love is it, I asked, if you keep pieces of someone else locked away in a box in your closet? The session ended in tense silence. As we walked to our separate cars in the parking lot, Emma grabbed my arm. I know I messed up, she said. I know I hurt you. But doesn't 6 years count for something? Don't all the good times we've had mean anything? I looked at her. Really looked at her, and saw the desperation in her eyes. She was scared of losing me, scared of being alone again, scared of facing the reality that she'd built a marriage on a foundation that was never quite solid enough. The good times matter, I said. But they don't erase the fact that I'm your second choice. They don't change the fact that when you think no one's listening, you say someone else's name. I made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Emma. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the grocery store. This is something deeper. This is you holding on to a past that didn't want you while taking for granted a present that does. She let go of my arm, tears streaming down her face. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up, I said quietly. I'm protecting myself from spending the rest of my life feeling like I'm not enough. We didn't make much progress that day. Dr. Patterson suggested we each spend some time thinking about whether we really wanted to fight for the marriage, or if we were just going through the motions because divorce seemed too hard. I ran into Olivia again 2 weeks later, completely by accident, at a coffee shop near my office. She was in line ahead of me, ordering something complicated with oat milk and an extra shot. When she turned and saw me, her face lit up. "The engineer who hates small talk," she said. "Fancy meeting you here." "It's the closest coffee shop to my office. I'm here embarrassingly often." "Same. Well, closest to my office, anyway." She gestured to a table. "Join me? Unless you're in a rush." I should have said I was busy. I should have grabbed my coffee and gone back to work. Instead, I said, "Sure." We sat by the window, watching the December rain. She told me about the literacy program, the kids she worked with, the volunteer who'd shown up drunk last week and had to be gently dismissed. I told her about the bridge project, the calculations that wouldn't quite work, the client who kept changing the design parameters. Normal, professional conversation. But there was something underneath it, a current of connection I couldn't quite name. The way she listened, really listened, like what I was saying mattered. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way I felt lighter somehow. Just being near her. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Okay. Tyler's wife mentioned you're married, but I noticed you don't wear a ring. And you have this look sometimes, like you're carrying something heavy." I glanced down at my left hand, at the pale strip of skin where my wedding band used to sit. I'd taken it off 3 weeks ago, after another fruitless therapy session. Emma had noticed, but hadn't said anything. "My marriage is complicated right now," I said carefully. "Most marriages are." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Mine certainly was. That's why it's past tense." "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." "He wasn't a bad person," Olivia said. "That's what made it so hard. He was kind, responsible, checked all the boxes, but there was no passion, no real partnership. We were two people, living parallel lives in the same house. When my mother got sick, I needed him to show up for me, really show up, and he just couldn't, or wouldn't. I'm still not sure which. I'm sorry. Don't be. Ending it was the best decision I ever made. I'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone." She met my eyes. "That probably sounds harsh." "No," I said. "It sounds honest." We talked for another hour. I was late getting back to the office, and I didn't care. When we finally parted ways, she said, "We should do this again sometime. It's nice to talk to someone who gets it." "Gets what?" "The whole messy reality of trying to figure out what you actually want instead of what you're supposed to want." I thought about that all evening. What did I want? Not what Emma wanted, not what Dr. Patterson was guiding us toward, not what our friends and family expected. What did I, Noah, actually want for my life? The answer came to me slowly over the following weeks. I wanted to feel like someone's first choice, not their safe option. I wanted to laugh without it feeling like work. I wanted to go to bed excited about waking up next to my partner, not dreading another day of polite distance and careful conversations. I wanted to feel the way I did when I talked to Olivia. It wasn't fair to Emma, I knew. It wasn't fair that I was comparing her to someone I barely knew. But emotions aren't fair. They're just true. Christmas approached. Emma suggested we host our usual dinner for her family, try to maintain some normalcy. I agreed, even though the thought exhausted me. We decorated the tree together in near silence, hanging ornaments we'd collected over the years. Each one had a memory attached. Our first Christmas as a married couple. The trip to Colorado. The year we adopted the cat who'd passed away last spring. Looking at those ornaments, I felt a deep sadness. Not for what I was losing, but for what I'd never really had. A partnership built on passion, not practicality. A love that was chosen every day, not defaulted to because the other option had failed. Emma's parents arrived on Christmas Eve, cheerful and oblivious. Her father asked about the guest room situation, whether I'd finished turning it into a home office like we'd planned. Emma jumped in with a smooth lie about me having back problems, needing a firmer mattress. Her mother fussed over my shoulder, which had healed weeks ago. I played my part, smiled at the right moments, laughed at her father's bad jokes, helped her mother in the kitchen, and felt like a ghost in my own life. We made it through dinner, through the gift exchange, through the ritual of watching her family's favorite Christmas movie. But when everyone finally left, and it was just Emma and me cleaning up the wrapping paper and dirty dishes, the silence felt suffocating. "I can't do this anymore," I said, setting down a stack of plates. Emma froze, a wine glass in her hand. "Can't do what?" "Pretend. Act cause. Like we're okay when we're not. Lie to your parents, to our friends, to ourselves. We're in therapy. We're working on it. Are we? Or are we just delaying the inevitable?" She set the glass down carefully, like it might shatter. "You've already made up your mind, haven't you? You're just waiting for the right moment to leave." "I don't want to hurt you," I said. "Then don't leave. Staying would hurt us both more. We'd just be going through the motions year after year, and eventually we'd hate each other for it." Emma sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. When she looked up, her eyes were red but dry. "Is there someone else?" "No," I said, and it was true. Nothing had happened with Olivia. Nothing would happen until I'd properly ended this first. But I think we both deserve to be with someone who makes us feel alive, not just comfortable. I do love you, Noah. I know, but not the way I need to be loved, and I don't love you that way either, if I'm being honest. We're friends who made a mistake thinking friendship was enough to build a marriage on. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just existing in the ruins of what we'd tried to build. Finally, Emma said, "Okay." "Okay?" "Okay, let's end it. You're right. I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if my husband wishes he was somewhere else. And you don't deserve to feel like a consolation prize." She wiped her eyes. "We'll tell people after New Year's. Give ourselves one more week to process before we deal with everyone's opinions." "Emma, I'm not being noble," she interrupted. "I'm being practical. Which is what we've always been, right? Practical. The divorce was amicable. We divided assets, sold the house, wished each other well. Her parents were disappointed, but understanding. Our mutual friends mostly drifted toward her, which was fine. I needed a fresh start anyway. I moved into a small apartment downtown, close to work, close to that coffee shop. I didn't reach out to Olivia right away. I needed time to process, to grieve, to figure out who I was outside of being Emma's husband. But 3 months later, on a rainy Tuesday in March, I walked into that coffee shop, and there she was. Same complicated oat milk order. Same warm smile when she saw me. "Noah," she said, "I was wondering if I'd see you again." "I've been dealing with some things," I said, "but they're dealt with now." She glanced at my left hand, at the tan line that had finally faded. "Good things or hard things?" Both. We took our usual table by the window. The rain streaked down the glass, and I told her everything. The fall from the ladder, the whispered name, the therapy sessions, and the guest room, and the ornaments that represented a life I'd never quite inhabited. She listened without judgment, without offering easy platitudes or trying to fix anything. When I finished, she said, "Can I tell you something my mother said to me right before the dementia? Took her completely?" "Please?" She said, "Life is too short to love anyone halfway." I didn't really understand it at the time, but after my divorce, after watching her fade away, after starting over from scratch, I get it now. Halfway love is just another form of loneliness. Your mother sounds like she was wise. She was. Olivia smiled, sad and sweet. She also would have really liked you. Yeah? She had a thing for honest men, said they were rare as hen's teeth. We started seeing each other after that, slowly and carefully. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into weekend hikes, museum visits, cooking together in her kitchen while she told me stories about the kids in her program. She met Tyler and Melissa, who welcomed her with knowing smiles and I told you so looks I pretended not to notice. It was different from what I'd had with Emma. Lighter, but also deeper. Easy, but in a way that came from genuine compatibility, not from avoiding difficult topics. When Olivia laughed, I found myself laughing too, not because I thought I should, but because joy was contagious when it was real. One evening, about 4 months into our relationship, we were walking through the park where Emma and I had gotten engaged. I'd avoided it since the divorce, but Olivia wanted to see the cherry blossoms, and I didn't want my past to dictate my present anymore. "Tell me about her," Olivia said as we walked. "Your ex-wife. What do you want to know? What made you fall for her in the first place?" I thought about it. She was kind, easy to be around. She laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. She made me feel stable, like I'd found my person and could check that box off my life plan. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds like relief. Maybe that's what I thought love was supposed to be. Relief from uncertainty, comfort from chaos. And now I know that real love should make you feel more alive, not less. It should add to your life, not just fill a space. Olivia squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you falling off that ladder was the universe doing you a favor. A painful favor. The best ones usually are. 6 months after our first coffee shop conversation, she asked me about my marriage. Not the end of it, which she knew about, but the beginning. "Did you love her?" she asked. We were in her apartment, cooking pasta, drinking wine, being the kind of domestic I'd thought I'd wanted with Emma. "I thought I did," I said honestly. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of her. The stability she represented. The future we were supposed to have. I don't know if I ever loved her for who she actually was. And Emma? Did she love you? She loved that I loved her. She loved feeling safe. But was it love? The kind that survives hard times and boring Tuesdays, and all the unglamorous reality of building a life together? I shook my head. I don't think so. Olivia stirred the sauce. Thoughtful. My ex-husband loved me, I'm sure of that. But he loved his version of me, the one he'd built in his head. When real-life me didn't match up, when I was messy and grieving and needed him to be uncomfortable for my sake, he couldn't handle it. So, what's the answer? I asked. How do you know if it's real? She turned off the stove, came to stand in front of me. I think you know it's real when someone sees all of you, the good and the bad and the boring, and chooses you anyway. Not because you're safe or convenient, but because they genuinely can't imagine their life being better with anyone else. Is that how you feel? I asked. About me? Getting there, she said, and kissed me. A year after my divorce was finalized, I sold the last piece of furniture Emma and I had bought together, a bookshelf that had never quite fit in my new apartment. Olivia helped me move it out, helped me fill the empty space with a reading nook she'd been hinting about for weeks. We were sitting in that nook, her head on my shoulder, both of us reading, when she said, "I love you." It was the first time either of us had said it. I set down my book, turned to face her. "I love you too." Not because I'm safe. You're many things, Olivia Grant. Safe is not one of them. You challenge me. You push me to be better. You make me want to show up fully instead of just going through the motions. Good, she said. Because I choose you, Noah. Every day I choose you. Not because my first choice didn't work out, not because you're convenient, but because you're exactly who I want. I kissed her then, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. 2 years later, I proposed in that same coffee shop where we'd had our first real conversation. The barista, who knew us by now, had helped me coordinate it. When Olivia said yes, crying and laughing at the same time, everyone in the shop applauded. We got married in a small ceremony in her mother's favorite park, surrounded by people who loved us both completely. Tyler was my best man. Melissa cried through the entire ceremony. The kids from Olivia's literacy program made us cards decorated with crayon hearts and misspelled congratulations. Emma sent a card too, which surprised me. Inside, she'd written, "I'm happy you found what we couldn't give each other. You deserved to be someone's first choice. Wishing you both all the best." It was generous of her, and I appreciated it. I'd heard through mutual friends that she was seeing someone new, a widower who apparently looked at her like she hung the moon. I hoped it was real for her this time. Everyone deserved that. On our wedding night, Olivia and I stayed up late in our hotel room, talking about everything and nothing, the way we always did. At some point, she asked, "Do you ever think about that day, when you fell from the ladder?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "It was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me." "How so?" "It broke something that needed to break. If I hadn't heard Emma say his name, if I hadn't fallen, I might have spent the rest of my life in a marriage that was fine, but not great. I would have convinced myself that fine was enough." I pulled her closer. "I never would have found you." "I'm glad you fell," she said. "That's a terrible thing to say." "I know, but I'm glad anyway." She kissed my forehead. "Your pain led you to me, and my pain led me to you, and now we get to be happy together. Is that selfish?" "Probably," I said. "But I don't care. We built a life together, Olivia and I. A real one, messy and imperfect and absolutely right. We bought a house with a big backyard for the dog we adopted, a golden retriever mix named Gatsby, who had more energy than sense. We fought sometimes, about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or whether we really needed to attend every single literacy program event, but we fought fair and always made up before bed. Olivia expanded her program, opened a second location across town. I made partner at my firm, led the design team on a civic center that won regional awards. We supported each other's dreams, challenged each other's assumptions, chose each other every single day. On our 3rd anniversary, we took a trip to the coast, rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean. One morning, I woke up early and watched Olivia sleep, her hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in the dawn light. I thought about all the paths that had led me to this moment, the broken shoulder, the whispered name, the painful unraveling of a marriage that was never quite right, the coffee shop conversations, the slow, careful building of something new. I thought about Emma, too, and hoped she'd found her own version of this. Not with Daniel, whoever he was, but with someone who chose her first and never looked back. Life had a strange way of working out, I realized. Sometimes the worst betrayals led to the best discoveries. Sometimes you had to lose yourself completely before you could find where you truly belonged. 3 years into our marriage, I found myself on a ladder again, painting the trim of our new house. Olivia was in the backyard, reading to a group of kids from her program under the shade of our oak tree. Her voice drifted up to me, animated and joyful, bringing a story to life. I paused in my painting, listening to her laugh at something one of the kids said. And I realized I was happy. Not the shallow happiness of checking boxes or meeting expectations, but the deep, bone-level satisfaction of being exactly where I was meant to be. The ladder was steady beneath my feet this time. My hands were sure. And when I climbed down later, I knew exactly who would be waiting for me at the bottom, ready to admire my work and kiss the paint smudge off my cheek. Olivia looked up from her reading, saw me watching, and blew me a kiss. I caught it, pressed it to my heart, and went back to painting. One of the kids shouted something about dragons, and Olivia laughed again, that bright, genuine sound that never failed to make me smile. This, I thought, was what it was supposed to feel like. Not settling, not safe, but chosen, every day, with full hearts and open eyes. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, when I was lying on that driveway with a broken shoulder and a broken heart, whether I'd ever feel this way again, I would have said no. I would have said the pain was too much, the betrayal too deep, the damage too permanent. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the beginning of the best thing. Sometimes you have to fall before you can learn to stand on solid ground. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted is how you find what you actually need. Emma's whispered name had shattered my world. But from those broken pieces, I'd built something infinitely better. A life with someone who chose me first, not as a backup plan or a safe option, but as the person she genuinely wanted to wake up next to every morning. That evening, after the kids had gone home and we'd cleaned up the yard, Olivia and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with grass and summer air. "Happy?" she asked. "Incredibly," I said. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." We sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people are completely at ease with each other, the kind I'd never had with Emma, even on our best days. And I understood finally what it meant to be someone's first choice. It wasn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. It was about being seen, fully and completely, and chosen anyway. It was about building something together, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. The ladder incident had been my fall, but this right here was my foundation. Solid, real, true, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.